This session is, the reason I'm standing down here is because I'm going to be running around with the microphone. We really want this to be a discussion. Diane Williams from the Safer Foundation, A.T. Wall from Rhode Island Department of Corrections, and I'm Carl Wicklund with the American Probation and Parole Association. And it's our hope that we can have an open and frank discussion. Anybody named Frank in here? Okay, good. Oh, there is somebody named Frank. Frank, we're going to have an open discussion. No, the goal really is we recognize that community-based programs and initiatives sometimes have difficulty having good communication with both community corrections, probation, parole, juvenile probation, parole, as well as institutions. And that communication may play out in a number of different ways. And it's our hope that the collective experience of the three of us and the collective experience, more importantly, of all of you, that we can learn from each other and try to develop some strategies that will help you have better communication and better outcomes for the people that we're all working with. So either one of you guys have any opening remarks you want to make?
I'll just tell them who we are.
Oh, good point.
I'll just take a couple of minutes and tell you a little bit about the Safer Foundation. We are a not-for-profit organization headquartered in Chicago, Illinois, with offices in 6 other locations throughout the state and in Davenport, Iowa. Our work focuses on working with people with criminal records exclusively and primarily to help them find employment. But we understand that it's not just the job itself that makes the difference. It's getting people ready to go to work. It's doing a good job of matching them with the right sort of position, and it's working with them post-placement to ensure that they can stay attached to the workforce. When I started at SAFER in 1995, we served a little under 2,000 people. In 2004, we were serving about 4,000 people, and we are slotted this year to serve about 14,000 people. Obviously, all those people who come to us are not ready to go to work, but they do need some level of support in making the transition from prison to home. And so we try to make sure that they get that kind of support. I think what we want to talk about today is partnerships and how to, in fact, connect with community corrections, whether it be probation or parole. I know that in some states they're under one leadership, in some other states they're under different leaderships. In Illinois, for example, probation is county and parole is state, so they're separate. But I can tell you that the outcomes that we generate are far better when we have good relationships, and those relationships are working effectively, than if we don't have those relationships. I won't say a whole lot more than that, but I'll answer whatever questions I might be able to answer about the kinds of work we do in conjunction with our community corrections in Illinois.
Thanks, Diane. My name is Ashbel Tingley Wall II, which is why I'm commonly called AT. It's a story too long to tell in the time allotted to us here. Suffice it to say that even my parents call me AT. I'm director of the Rhode Island Department of Corrections. We are a full-service correctional agency, meaning that we're responsible not only for the state's prisons, but also its jails and its parole and probation supervision services. So if you're 18 years of age or older, or you're a juvenile waived into the adult system, then we have the responsibility. And our reach is quite vast. On any given day, 1 out of every 21 men in the state is under our authority in some fashion. In my hometown, by the way, Providence, where I live still, it's 1 out of every 11. In any event, I see my role here today as talking to the extent that you wish about how to connect to corrections departments, both in terms of the initial kind of engagement and also perhaps strategies for when you might actually be going inside the institutions. Happy to talk about probation and parole as well if that's where you'd like to go.
And just a little bit more about my background. I am currently the director of the American Probation and Parole Association, but I was the director of a 3-county probation and parole system that handled both juvenile and adult Probation and Parole, as well as juvenile detention. But prior to that, I spent about 20 years of my life developing and running both residential and non-residential programs in the community for juvenile and young adult offenders, both male and female, and did a lot of work. I remember I was one of the first people to ever enter a prison to interview somebody before they came out. And I used to have, they actually gave me my own office at the juvenile correctional facility where I could go in and interview young men and women that were coming out, as well as stay in contact with those that had been in our program and ended up back in there so that we could maintain some continuity of care. I'm curious, in the audience today, is there anybody here that is not part of a community-based program?
They're the feds.
Oh, you're feds, okay.
They're the feds.
And Lori, you're a fed too. Okay. Does anybody want to share any kind of challenge that they're having right now in trying to work collaboratively with either a community-based correctional program or community-based corrections or prison-based program?
Like I explained to Flash earlier, AT earlier today.
There's a
Flash.
story to it. Again, too long to tell in the time allotted.
Yeah, AT has quite a bit of stories. We went to the correction department with proposals for the mentoring program for the women, and we sat down and had meetings with the deputy of programs, the superintendents at both facilities that we're working out of. And after several meetings, they said, okay, they allowed us in the facility. We did presentations to the women. We got our mentees. We recruited mentors. We were well on our way. And then all of a sudden, Albany, who they report to, said that they had to put a hold on the program because they knew nothing about the program, that the correction departments decided themselves to allow us in to run this program, but they never communicated with their higher beings. So the program was on hold for about a month or two until Volunteer Services had us resubmit proposals and our training modules and every other piece of paperwork that we've made up for the program, and still they haven't quite cleared the program again yet. So it has been a little challenging and set us back a couple of months.
And is this a granted, one of the programs that received the grant? Yes. So you're under the gun? Okay. Anybody else have similar experiences?
It sounds as if you're caught up in, well, let's put it this way. Whatever else is true of corrections departments, we are large, cumbersome bureaucracies. And sometimes what people perceive as venal is nothing more than sheer kind of incompetence. Don't give us too much credit for being intentionally difficult. That can be true, but sometimes it really is just that things move slowly, and there are various levels that have to be considered. I would say, in your case, it sounds to me as if that's what happened, that you're paying the price for some disconnect between the central office in Albany and what's happening on the ground. And while that's not yours to fix, here you are kind of held hostage to it. I would say that there's no reason why you can't be in touch fairly frequently, just saying, need to know where it stands. Is there anybody that we should talk to? Want to be sure that this federal money is properly spent. The message coded in there is you don't want to be embarrassed, Corrections Department. and see how that plays out. And ultimately, you may need to intercede with an intermediary, somebody, a legislator, an assemblyman, something like that. But that's how I would handle it for now. I would be a steady presence, kind of nudging, and explaining that there are some consequences to this and that no one wants to be embarrassed here. We do respond to fear.
First, I would like to say that our warden has gone beyond to try to help us get our program up and going, and has accommodated us with everything possible. But one of the barriers that we're having trouble with is the technology. We have our mentors, they've gone through their training, and they're waiting now for their visitor ID, but their machine has been down for like 2 months. So we have mentors, mentees ready to get together where they can get on their visitation list, but we're still waiting, and I understand that, you know, the warden doesn't have control over that, but I just want to send a shout out to our warden, Warden Mack, because he works with us. He says, because if we're in there, that's helping the inmates. So he tries his best to get us in there to work with the inmates, and I feel for you that are having trouble.
The Second Chance Act was passed with broad support from both houses and both parties. It is federal money, and no one wants to hear that the jurisdiction they represent got one of these very precious and highly competitive grants, and through something as mundane as the machine, the money couldn't be spent. So I think what you do is you approach the warden with whom you've got a relationship and say, I'm worried, I'm concerned, I don't want this outcome.
We have a wonderful working relationship in general with our Department of Corrections, and we had a tremendous supportive letter when we applied for this grant, and they have been thrilled that we got it. What we're not seeing is the trickle down from the top to the people who actually have to make the decisions to let our mentors in. So I'm looking for some suggestions on how to approach the whole bureaucratic, hierarchical structure in the Department of Corrections in such a way that we can light a fire under the people who are actually going to open the door and let us in.
I represent Arches in the state of Missouri, and we had a similar kind of situation where the local State Department of Corrections gave us the okay. They identified the correctional facilities in terms of where we would do the work, but then it was the line staff that were not familiar with the program. And so what we did prior to starting the program, because we're operating in 2 correctional facilities, one for men and one for women, and so we did initially was to have a sit down with the warden of each of those correctional facilities and ask them also to bring their line staff, those staffers that would be directly responsible for engaging with us, our volunteers, and the case managers that would be facilitating the work. And once we were able to do that, I mean, we had half-day meetings at both facilities. And once we were able to do that type of engagement, explain to them that this project was being funded by U.S. Department of Justice, and it was a collaborative partnership, then we really got their buy-in. But it was making sure that we had the key folks involved, top down and bottom up, and then that really provided us with the assistance we needed to move the process forward.
I heard you say that you got a letter of support in advance. I'm wondering, for those of you that are having some of those difficulties, did you sit down with anybody in advance of the submission to talk about the actual project as opposed to just getting the letter, and so did that person disappear, or still not going through? Because I would tell you, and I would tell you that today, what we asked to do, not always successful, what we asked to do in addition to covering it with the director or with somebody at a high level is we ask him who his point person will be. And based on that point person, we make sure that we try to educate that point person as well and provide them with, quite frankly, some sort of an operating guide or something to know what to expect so that they can start to think about how we will operationalize that project once we get it.
When we're dealing with mentoring, and inside the prison, you know, that has no problem. We have a collective audience there. But when we transform out, we're dealing with parole, and especially in California, all our parole agents come from custody. So you have the custody mentality outside in parole. And somebody mentioned this morning about gauging their success and their ability to arrest, not their ability to prevent crime. You know, it's a philosophical question, but it's one that's there, especially with parole in California right now, is all they want to do is just get this parolee and send them back. They don't want to prevent that by embracing the mentoring programs and things like that. How would you address that?
Well, California has its own problems. Yes, and so you have lots of opportunity, right? I think, like what some of the people have said, I would actually reach out at the top at the state. I would let them know, you know, what it is you're trying to do. I don't know if you've done that yet. Talk to the director, or even the director of parole, or the deputy director of corrections, Matt Kane.
Yeah, I know Matt real well.
Yeah.
I think what I did is I probably leapfrogged because I know him. I was introduced to him through legislators, and it's kind of hard to go downward because you don't want to throw his name away around, and then people still know that you have a relationship with him. So it's gotten even more difficult because they think I'll go to him, which I won't. You know, and, you know, their wardens are their capitals.
Yep.
Can I
Yeah,
ask a
and
question?
I was just going to say, I think it might be very helpful, though, if you reach out to Matt and try to pull together a meeting with Matt and some of the, if not the line officers, some of the line supervisors within parole, and have, you know, just ask for a couple hours to sit down and talk about what it is that you're trying to do, and how you figure out ways that you guys can work, if not together, at least so you're not, you know, working at cross purposes.
I want to build relationships. I would like for you to talk about building those relationships so that it works for both agency and the men and the women that we serve,
Right.
without threatening.
Because
Because of what someone said about, when we were at another one, when he was talking about with parole, you know, just want to get people, the numbers, how did he say that? Somebody, I just heard him say it. And versus the number of people we can house in jail versus the people we can keep from going to jail, you know? So if I could get parole to buy into, well, I think the word is compassion, to, with the people that we're serving so that we can work together, the collaborative effort from the prison inside too, you know, because it can take some time for clearance and those things.
Sure.
So if I'm gonna get frustrated and frustrate the jail, the man, then that's an issue in itself that so how do I take out the frustration so that I can?
what I was wondering is if there was some sort of misunderstanding or some sort of clarity that could come from the Bureau of Justice Assistance that is funding this initiative and that probably already has a good relationship with the people across these states. So I thought it might actually be easier and less threatening if perhaps they were reaching out to ask for support in letting people to implement the initiatives that they've proposed. So yeah, just to be, I couldn't agree with you more. I would tell you that whether we're talking about this arena or any other arena in our lives, you know, if we are building positive relationships and making commitments that we keep, we can have a better chance at having other folks view us the same way and keep commitments that they make to us. And so no, I'm a firm supporter of a very positive relationship building.
We have a little more of an issue. We actually have gotten to the governor and we've gotten to all the prisons. So we've gone and visited, we've written letters. Oregon has implemented a transitional coordinator that they would like to utilize, but we can't get to that top guy in there. And our legislation is a bit disjoint from the bureaucrats of our state, so you can't apply pressure that way through the distance. Also, didn't the DOJ send out letters to the states letting them know we're coming?
I don't know.
I mean, if it's, don't misunderstand, but if it's this big of a deal, in which I've gotten the idea that it is, I did not promote this as it's from the DOJ, it's the first time. We're looking for cooperation. And I think that would answer the lady's remark over there. It would be nice if maybe there was a letter of announcement from the DOJ that we're coming around.
I was thinking.
I know because of the job I hold that well, two things are true. One, that, again, it may not be willful obstructionism, it may just be bureaucracy. I mean, I'm the CEO of my department, supposedly the king of all I see, and I'm perpetually exasperated by what I discover is not happening at the line level that I have, sort of in my majesty, ordered at the top. It happens with regularity. So the question is, what do you do with that? The fact that the bureaucracy isn't working well. I think there are a couple of strategies. One is that you do have the power that Diane has alluded to, the fact that you are federal grantees. And that's, and believe me, people in my position are far more sensitive to the implications of that than people at lower levels who don't need, that's not their concern. They're thinking about other things. So that's the kind of thing that really probably does need to be brought up at the top. That, and then you'll see if you'll get the kind of access that you need. And if you don't, again, it may well simply be that A communicated it to B, who communicated it to C, who didn't communicate it to D, and you go back to A and say, something must have gone wrong here because it didn't go down. The second would be that if you're talking to somebody, if you're actually talking to somebody at a relatively high level, that you know you're not going to be able to take up a lot of their time or attention. You need something done that's essential to you, but not particularly important to the person with the power, unless it turns into a political issue. And to them, you sort of say, would you be willing to give me the phone number of the person you think can solve this problem, and may I say that I spoke to you and you recommended I talk to them? And that message is understood by the people receiving it. In other words, you don't want to leave that person's phone office, or you don't want to conclude that phone call without getting that person's buy-in to giving you a phone number and allowing you to use the name.
But I think the one thing that we need to keep in mind, don't discount the small connections that you make in the community, because people do talk. I know within our agency, parole officers are starting to talk to each other about what we're doing. And I think sometimes we want to get to the top, and maybe we need to consider in our sphere of influence who it is that we're influencing in our arena that may talk to somebody else, that may talk to somebody else. And doors will begin to open, and just keep pressing.
What really is, it's about this is what I can do for you. We have money to spend. And in this era of budget cuts, it's a four-letter word now. People don't have money in our Department of Corrections, in our county jails, in our counties. Nobody has money. We're bringing the money to the table, and the resources, and the program. And so if you talk about it as sort of, this is what I want to do for you, as sort of a goodie package. And again, you probably have made these connections, you got the letter to begin with, but now you're implementing the program, and and I know people, they have their jobs, they're doing their stuff, they don't really want to hear it, but it's more about what I can do for you to lighten your burden and to lower your budgets, lower prison costs, lower jail costs. And so you still have to sell. But in addition to that part is, this is a federal grant. The administration's on board, the Attorney General's on board. It doesn't hurt to talk about where this money's coming from. And so anyway, it was just a comment.
Yeah, I also think it's important that everybody has basically the same goal, and that's public safety. And you just have some different things that you're bringing to the table. And I don't think that what any of us have said is actually saying that you threaten people, but you got to let them know what the reality is. We have this money that came from the federal government, and we're not able to do anything with it because of snafus in your bureaucracy. And can you help us do that?
One of the questions I have, I'm from New York, and I've been volunteering and now I'm part of a reentry initiative for probably the past 20 years. And I've had a past life working for Eastman Kodak Company, and anybody who's familiar with them knows the downslide they took over the years, going from over 100,000 employees, so they probably have about 15,000 now in the city. We're working with an organization that, we're going in all excited about what we can do for these people to keep them from going back to prison. But from a change management standpoint, that also means we're talking to people whose jobs may get eliminated. So what's being done in the overall big picture to kind of help them in the change management piece to say this is good for everybody, because let's face it, those of us on the front lines, we hear it all the time, whether it be from some guy kind of mumbling it or somebody over here saying, these guys are getting an education. I can't even afford to send my kids to college. Or you've got all this stuff going on to keep these folks from coming back to prison. But meanwhile, when that happens, what are you going to do to get me a job? So is it right? No, probably not. But it's a practical reality that a lot of these walls we're seeing might be some of that, going on behind the scenes. There's a whole system that we're talking about taking down, essentially. So, I mean, is there anything from a bigger picture? Because that's from a systematic standpoint, that's a piece of the pie. And we're going in it from one angle, but I don't know if we're addressing that angle that really is. Now we're really collaborating by bringing them on board and supporting their needs after all this happens.
I mean, I think you raised a lot of good points, and building a WIFM list, as they call it, what's in it for me, sort of a list to talk to people about is probably not a bad thing to have in your back pocket as you have that conversation, and to sort of use those or communicate those benefits as you go through it. It's kind of interesting though, because I guess what I'm trying to think about how do we think about this at a broad enough scale to have positive impact across the board? How do we, how do we think about how to direct you even? It sounds like a lot of people are trying to go to the directors. Some people have identified line staff that they can connect with. And the truth is there's a slew of people in between and across. And there is, I mean, somehow there has to be some connection between you and one of those people so that even if they can't actually do the work with you, they can walk you through the system and the structure and get you to the people that do that for you. And I mean, I'm looking to you guys, and you guys now saying, what kind of ideas might you have? Because it sounds like what we need is an easel up here so we can build what I call a multi-level positioning chart, and to think about what those positions are and what those people care about at those different levels and across in those different departments, so that you can build that WIFM list and start to have those kind of communications with them, because somehow you've got to get through that piece of it to even begin to build the relationship. I mean, we've all probably built very good, very strong relationships along the way, but somehow we got to first find the right people to build the relationship with. Maybe AT can help us with that.
I'm not so sure. I'd like to address that portion of your question which speaks to the anxiety of custodial staff. I think that there are some options here, but it begins with this. A recognition that our staff, they feel pretty marginalized too. It's not just the inmates, it's the staff. The staff, so much of what they do occurs behind walls and fences, and it's not known, it's not understood, and people fill that void with all sorts of fantastical ideas about their indifference or their brutality. The fact is that our correctional officers do not have the image that I think they deserve, and certainly that they feel that they deserve. And it's reinforced when they perceive that people, volunteers or community-based people are coming in, regard their efforts to provide security as irritating, inconvenient, and project a sense that they expect to have to be given a hard time. I've seen it happen before where people from the community who often have the aura of respectability about them will brush by the correctional officer. Not stop, not shake the hand, not make a little small talk, and that cuts deeply. And you would think, why should it? But it does. So I would say that those relationships need to begin with making a real effort there. It will often work, sometimes it won't. If it won't, then you hope you've built a relationship with their supervisor, the area lieutenant or something like that. So you can say, gee, I don't know what the issue is with this guy. But I do think that that part is essential. I also think the second part of respect is remembering what it looks like from their point of view. Of course, they are worried about their jobs. I would argue, for the most part, there isn't reason. I mean, this work, there are always going to be plenty of people incarcerated, sadly enough. Also, the work that you're doing is not going to create the kind of overwhelming numbers that will cause a cell block to be closed or a prison to be shut down. Right. Those decisions are being made by their elected officials at the legislature through vast policy changes that really don't have to do with the kind of work that concerns you. And they, on some level, you need to say, hey, I'm kind of just here, reeling in fish one at a time. I'm not draining the ocean. And also respect for the fact that when you come in, the mere fact that you're coming in poses risk for our staff. You might think, why is this? I mean, my motives are pure. I'm certainly not going to be lugging in contraband. I'm going to follow the rules. But from their point of view, the way the line staff is judged is not something as abstract as whether the person never comes back. It's whether they maintain the order, safety, and security. And anybody who comes in from the outside poses possible risk. And they know that their job rises or falls on whether that contraband got past them or whether there was an uproar in the visiting room. And that, just remembering how it looks to them will, I think, help in the relationship.
As AT was talking, it reminded me of a lesson my father gave me, who was a salesman, and I'd go on sales calls with him, and we go into these large plants, and he would remind me that there wasn't an important person, that everybody working there was important. Right. There was nobody more important than the receptionist, the line worker, whatever, that without any one of them, things didn't work. And so when I started trying to get into prisons and into facilities, and when I started to reach out to probation and parole, I always kept that in mind. So I got just as well with the receptionist as I did with the warden.
I just wanted to make a suggestion that that may improve some of the of expediting our entry into these locations. That it could be if we put out something where it's more of a reward or some type of incentive on their part to give feedback back to their hierarchy that we have just finished doing such and such in this particular program. We look to have coming in on such and such a date, so it looks more of something that they're embracing as opposed to giving us the impression that they're trying to impede it or going from one bottleneck to another. If it was more of something that came down from their hierarchy that indicated that this is something we embrace and we'd like to get your feedback, let us know when you are making it happen. So it puts more of an energy behind their efforts.
Along the lines of what AT spoke about, the Each One Reach One mentoring program, and we're in Cleveland, Ohio, the G-Church project. We recruited a corrections officer to become a mentor.
That's right. That's what
he,
exactly right.
And I would like to say his name. His name is Tito Bradley, and he agreed to become a mentor because it's a perfect example of collaborating not only just with the mentoring program, but with the community. Tito stated that very often he came into contact with children or young adults that were his friends' kids. And he wanted to be a major part of reducing recidivism with them. So therefore, when he heard of the opportunity, and he received it
idea.
very well.
That's
And not only is Tito an exemplary example of a mentor, he's encouraging his coworkers to be one as well.
That is a great idea. Because when I was sitting here, we were just kind of chatting to the second, because I was thinking, so what role do the people in the systems have in the work that you're going to do? I have to say, I guess we've been very blessed along the way. We have pretty good relationships. We have staff inside 2 prisons full-time. So we have staff inside prisons that are doing job training and preparedness programs and helping people to get ready to go to work. And then we work with those same people when they come back. And it really was a joint idea and a joint project from the very beginning. So corrections, which Parole is a part of, and our organization and a number of other organizations sat around the table. We invited sort of national policy people to come and advise us, and we built a model together. And so because we built something together and then had to implement it together, once we got the funding for it, the relationships were built throughout the process. And so it was a lot easier. And it sounds to me like that's exactly what you did in just a different way. You got somebody involved as a mentor that can help you through that process, and who not only can help you, but wants it to work because he's a part of it. And I think that's a really good strategy to employ.
I wanted to also share a positive experience from our reentry program in West Virginia. I'm Michelle Foster with KISRA in West Virginia. And our reentry program was born out of our Responsible Fatherhood program when we discovered that over 60% of participants had a criminal background. So we approached the DOC with building, we really had no specific reentry funding at the time. We approached them, sharing with them what we found in the clients that we were serving, and developed relationships with them. And it so happened that we spoke to as many people as we could, and actually found a champion, someone who she was over programs for the entire state. And she became a champion of what we do. And she opened up doors. You know, we went to meetings and we mentioned her name. Oh, if you worked with Jennifer, you must be okay. And she, just connecting with that champion, I think has really helped us. Right. And we also sought their expertise in other areas. And I'll let Carl talk about that.
Yeah, one thing you want to do, you want to be humble. And these are professionals that you're working with, so the concern that they have sometimes, especially working with faith-based organizations, that we're bleeding hearts. So we asked them to provide a Corrections 101 training for us. And that's when we learned about contraband and what all contraband was and how much cigarettes we're going for. And wow, you can make a lot of money off cigarettes in West Virginia. And then you also can't take for granted that just because you think you know something, that's all there is to know. We sit on both a state reentry task force and a federal reentry task force. So we were meeting only with the Southern District on the federal side. There were 4 other federal institutions that we had not even been in contact with. I had to go all the way to Texas just to meet them, and then go back to West Virginia to tour their facility. So just because you discover a small nugget doesn't mean that there's all out there to meet, So as much as you can be open and find out more knowledge, always be an open vessel.
And build relationships instead of just approaching from implementing my program.
Right.
Hi, I'm Sol Rodriguez. I'm from Rhode Island. I actually
Now
work very closely with AT, and we're sort of fortunate in Rhode Island that we're a very small state, so we can almost reach out and touch anybody, and it's very easy to actually make contacts with individuals at the state level fairly easily. I think that there's definitely always a tension, even though AT, we work in partnership, there's a tension between the Department of Correction and oftentimes with the work that we do in the community. And I think it's a healthy tension. And I wouldn't shy away from that tension. It's sort of, we sort of keep each other honest in a way. We're always trying to do more work in the community. Oftentimes we sort of, we'll inch DOC along with us. And AT will tell you we're often in his office asking him to do things that he's not always, willing to do, but often comes along, over time. So I think that it's all about building that relationship. It's about continuing the conversation. It's about not giving up. It's also about being able to see things from another perspective. So understanding how those systems work, what might keep them from moving in your direction, and trying to make compromises. So it's all about all those things. And I know it's not as easy as for some of you as it is in Rhode Island because it's such a small state, but I think you need to keep trying, and it's about being tenacious.
Are there people here that have gotten their projects sort of at least up? And are you now starting to think about the next steps and next levels and that kind of thing? Are there some of those kinds of things that we might be able to help you with? And we're starting to get some hands up. Okay.
One of the things that we have started doing is within the correction system, we go into 2 prisons on Fridays. So we make it a point to talk with the unit managers in regards to some of the people that are in our program. What do they feel some of the best ways that we can serve them? So we take input from them as well. It's not just us coming in trying to run our program and leaving them out, because they're dealing with these people on a daily basis. We were doing a curriculum-based program, and we've started to move away from that to deal with their daily needs of how to get out and get a job. Even though our curriculum did cover that, but it wasn't being just straight to the point, not so much book knowledge, but just basic common sense and street knowledge to help them survive when they do get out. That's going to be a legal way of doing things. We have people that don't know how to grocery shop. Some people have never held a budget or know how to do those things. So those are the things that we're trying to enforce now. We're working with the corrections officers and getting their input and basically just trying to build that relationship. Like she said, Warden Mack has been great to us, but it does start on the inside for us to be able to go in and work with the corrections officers and to work with the warden as well.
Well, I was just about ready to stand up, sir. I do that a lot in Oklahoma. My hand is now tired, but I think are we still on the first one that I was trying to talk about, or are we going on to the second? I can kind of roll that all into one if you want me to.
Okay, that's fine.
All right.
I love that energy.
My name is Donna, and I'm from Oklahoma, and we have Ocarta Cares out there. And I'll tell you something that really helped us from the very beginning. If you're trying to break down some of those barriers that continue to keep you out of helping people in the prisons, and that is, we put together an advisory board, and that advisory board had legislators. A hero. We picked a hero out of the legislators for Oklahoma, Senator Connie Johnson, and we had Lee Klinger from the Department of Corrections, and then they sent some of the kind of lower level management from the 2 prisons that we were in within about a month after we had started our first advisory board. And what was really neat about it was the next meeting of that advisory board, now the bigwigs who had sent the underlings to this little hokey board meeting thing, they came and said, no, you're not going, we're going. And so it just built this real excitement and that they're part of a board, and so all we got to do is go to that board and say, we might be having a few problems here. And it's really kind of neat because we're getting input from all about the community about that. And so we go to 2 prisons, Monday and Tuesday, and but that's how it starts. But we also, as our project has gone forward, I think we've gone forward a little bit further because of once you start, if you start something, we had like 9 participants in the first prison and like 8 showed up the second. Well, the next week we had 25 and we had 20. So I mean, now we're just like everyone's knocking down the door and you have to cut it off somewhere. But we also role model as an agency. I've got, I hired 2 ladies that had not graduated drug court yet. So I've got judges on my advisory board. I've got community sentencing on my advisory board. I mean, you just got to go to all types of gamuts of your community and make an advisory board. I mean, number one, it's a board. You want me on your board? Well, how much do I got to pay? You don't. Just show up, and that's always a neat, they show up, and you give them a few little coffee and donuts, and they really show up. But anyway, so, my deal is that what's neat about it is that I also have a young lady who's working for me that is still inside prison, and she's on a release program. And so she's working for me and will continue to work for me once she is paroled. She got made parole, and we've just gotten 2 of the ladies out of prison as far as the second part of what we were talking about. And the first place they came to was us, because we're not only taking the people who are teaching these ladies some of our workshops, but we took the mentors, some mentors from recovery in the community, ladies in long-term recovery, and they go every night with us right there, so they can help mentor these ladies while they're in the classroom. So I mean that really does help. If that helps with how we're putting it together, we just continue to reach out and utilize some inside info too, with hiring people and saying we're an agency that's going to hire as we continue to build on that advisory board. So I don't know if that helps, but I hope so.
Good afternoon. I'm Barbara Slaton, Executive Director of OAR of Richmond in Virginia. OAR stands for Offender Aid and Restoration. I've been somewhat hesitant to say anything, and this is some more of our staff here in the Second Chance Project, because we've been so fortunate, because for us, the mentoring component was an enhancement of what we were already doing. In Virginia, when Mark Warner was governor in 2003, he got Virginia to apply with the National Governors Association for technical assistance on looking at your reentry policy. You know, bringing all your state agencies together first and find out how everybody impacted reentry. Well, OAR has been around since 1971, doing, case management in all of our area jails, and now with the reentry initiative, the state initiative, going into the prisons. And so we're sitting there like probably some of you who had been doing this kind of work for years, like, oh, gee, somebody with some power finally recognized that people are getting out of prison and need services. So I've been with OAR since 1990, and we've been busting our butt. We're a small nonprofit, and you're not always, you don't have the customer, the client, whatever your organization calls him or her, that's easy to raise money for. And I mean, you know that. You've been providing these services. You've been working with folks. So we were not about to be pushed aside by state agencies, state government agencies, and local government agencies, to tell you the truth. So we were involved in the entire process. We participated in a lot of the task forces set up by the governor. And when I say we, I mean there are a number of service providers throughout the state. OAR, there are 4 OARs in Virginia, and we were all involved in this. In 2006, what happened was that at that point, they decided to do some pilot reentry initiatives around the state. And Richmond was one, and these were volunteer initiatives. No money came with it. So, but we were already providing services. So we were already working with probation and parole. We were working with all these other service providers. So what we did then was all of the sites, departments of social services were selected as the conveners of these initiatives, because all localities, for the most part, have a social services department. So in Richmond, OAR co-convenes a Richmond Regional Reentry Council with Richmond Social Services, and we co-coordinate the Richmond Regional Reentry Program. So we started a state reentry initiative going into partner prisons back in 2006. So we'd already developed those relationships. We have a direct services team. Probation and parole is on that team. They're not thinking law enforcement or compliance when they're on that team. I mean, they're thinking about services and going inside with the direct services team to meet with the inmate who's coming back to our region. And scheduling, making all the arrangements for where they're going to live. I mean, I'm sure some of you deal with sex offenders coming out and there's no housing. Well, we've had sex offenders as part of our state initiative, and they've not come out homeless because you're identifying them early. So, and we have an institutional team. So we have people at the table inside. We have a point person inside. And when we've added prisons, and when we do that, we go meet with the warden and whomever he identifies as wanting to be on this institutional reentry team. So our mentoring has just added, it's enhanced so much that whole system, because now we're getting the opportunity to bring in more members of the community. And we have, I think, 14 or so trained at this time. And we have one participant who was matched and came out in February, and he's doing really well. Employment is an issue in our community, just as it is probably all over the country. But he has housing, and he's primarily working on his GED at this point. We have another one who's going to be getting out in a few months that's been matched. So I guess the only thing that we've run into, it's probably just it's nobody's fault thing in that we're training because we have state training that has to be done coming from the Virginia Department of Social Services. Then you have to train to our own organization and the services we provide and the eligibility. And then we train to probation and parole, and we train about institutions. So when you're trying to get people scheduled for training, your mentors, the ones that you've already approved for the training, it just takes longer than I had thought it was going to take. You know, it might take 3 months from when you first start with a potential mentor until you actually can get them inside. And it's nobody's fault, it's just everybody's busy schedules. But that's been, with me, I guess, the only thing that's been of an issue. And I don't know if you all who are going inside, if you all have anything else to add. It's been delightful.
Carl, if I may.
You may.
Part of having an effective relationship, of course, includes strategies for navigating rough waters. And I don't know whether you've had any of these experiences, but somebody somewhere in the room probably will. I'm talking about when things sort of go bad. That is to say, there's a war of words between one of your volunteers and a custody staff person, or boundary issues arise wherein there's a perception that one of your volunteers is getting too close and personal with an offender, or confidentiality questions where we in corrections really want to know something that that the mentor doesn't want to tell, or criminal history questions. Somebody that you feel passionately can and should be allowed to do this work, we feel equally passionately should not be allowed inside. Have any of you had any of those experiences or given thought to how you'll deal with them when they arise?
Thank you. I'm Marcia Temple. I'm the Executive Director of the Integrated Recovery Network in Los Angeles. And I know you asked for rough waters, and I'm going to tell you that in just a second. But I have to mirror and echo what you said about relationships. You know, Los Angeles County Jail is the biggest jail system in the nation. We also have the largest homeless population in the nation. Just so happens that we have one of the best sheriffs in the nation. We've been working with the sheriff on helping homeless people find housing. Now, reentry as an idea hasn't been embraced in Los Angeles County, but find homes for homeless people so they don't go that swiveling door between Twin Towers, where the really sick, crazy people are, and Skid Row is nonstop, and the sheriff wants to stop it. And so because we're working on a common goal, we have a great relationship with him, his line staff, and the individual people. So what I'm saying is, yeah, no, we've had some problems, but we also have people to call, people to talk to, because we're working on common goals. And we're just really grateful to have this opportunity to make it to make it better, to make it more effective.
Can I ask a question? One of the things, and by the way, in a minute, shortly I'm going to do a recap. I've heard a lot of strategies, and I don't know if you guys were writing as fast as I was, but I've got like a whole little list of strategies, and I'm going to just recap them based on things that everybody's been saying over the course of the session. But I heard one strategy as training. That is, training the staff that are going into the institutions. And even if you're not going into institutions, if your mentoring program is in the community, training, I think, is really sort of a big issue and can be a very effective strategy if it's employed appropriately and if it's the right training. So I'm curious as to, are you building your own training? Are you bringing people in to do training? Because I do know that there are organizations like in Oakland, I don't know if they're still there, there was the mentoring, what was it? I can hear you. Well, there was another group, because we actually used the Mentoring Center. We actually brought them to Chicago several times for part of our PRI, now Rexo, initiative, and so which is a Department of Labor initiative that we implemented in the Chicago metropolitan area. So I'm curious about your training.
My name's Denise Morris, and I'm with the Alaska Native Justice Center. So we have a tribal program. And of course, being from Alaska and having the jurisdictional issues around tribes in the state, et cetera, it was always very, very interesting. But we were a second-generation prisoner reentry grantee. So we were actually in the institutions providing direct services to individuals. And then we were doing a great job when you were talking about little issues, boundaries, pinches, and 40% of the incarcerated population, since the state of Alaska has begun to keep numbers, 40% of the incarcerated population are Alaska Natives. We're only 16% of the population as a whole, and if you subtract children from that number that are under the age of 18, you can see that those numbers for Alaskan Natives are epidemic. So where we ran into a little pinch was now the state of Alaska, which is a good thing, is going to be developing a reentry program. And they've put together a task force to develop a strategic plan for the state of Alaska, which is a little bit different than the services that we've already been providing within the institutions. So we're getting support from the correctional officers basically saying, wait a second, you guys have been coming into our institutions and doing a great job. Why are you not going to continue to provide these services? So inadvertently, we've caused a little friction within the Department of Corrections saying, well, we would like to continue to provide the services, except for the state of Alaska wants us to step over here and do post-release services, because they're going to be doing pre-release services. So the correctional officers are going, well, we don't want to do that job. We want you to do that job. So at any rate.
Hi, I'm Deborah with Welcome Home Ministries. And we did a training last month. And we had just sent out invitations to, some were parents of women that had been incarcerated. Some were from churches that have supported us financially in the past. We had peers that had finished their probation parole stipulations and are now going on in their educations and are working and reunited with their families that have decided to give back. I believe we had 25, and then 4 of us staffed it. We did a PowerPoint presentation and a manual. And handed it out and then did a survey at the end and had some real positive feedback. And already out of that 25, we've had 4 or 5 women be very faithful to come into one of our offices and start providing services and learning what we do. And each one of us there that are staff sort of take one under our wing for a couple hours, get them busy. And a lot of them are professionals. It's not hard for them to answer a phone, greet a woman, because we deal with women that walk in the door, and give them some encouragement, maybe get them started on the intake process or give them a referral. And then I've got them doing 30-day updates with women that we've met in the jails, which is just a short cheat sheet of just seeing where they're at. and then making an appointment if there's a critical incident with them. So we're really excited, and they're excited, and they're empowered, and now they're telling their friends. And we're doing a kickoff celebration from that training now on June 4th, and we're going to invite all of the people that are in programs and that are incarcerated to come and meet up with these 25 women so we can hopefully marry them up to one or more for them to be mentored in whatever capacity that these other people have gifts in. And so we're excited about that, and we're going to do a celebration for birthdays that day and milestones, and we're really excited about it. So that's what we're doing.
Sounds wonderful. So you want me to just, so here's my list. I'm taking these strategies. Just want you to know I'm stealing all of them. One of them was donuts and coffee. Let me tell you, don't laugh, it works, we know, it works. Another one was advisory boards, making sure that the members of the advisory board were representative of the various groups that would touch this work and that could have the ability to support the work being completed. Inclusion was a third one. We talked about making sure that there was a role or some inclusion, some way to include those other folks who are, again, a part of the process, even if they didn't know it up front. We talked about personal introductions, so that if there is a relationship with one person, you can leverage that relationship and give personal introductions to other folks that are part of the system. We talked about respect for staff, sort of putting ourselves in their place to understand what they might need to hear or to how you might need to interact with them in order to have an effective relationship. We talked about doing your homework so that you could know the WIFM, the what's in it for me, for those people. We talked about building a strategy to handle problems before the problem occurs so that we can be prepared, because no matter how hard we work or how much we do the right thing, something is probably going to come up at some point in time. And so if we have a strategy to address it before it happens, we're probably in much better shape. We talked about recognizing that we're guests and that we can become a risk, and so we have to be very careful not to have that happen. So we have to view the opportunity to work in those institutions and with the people that we serve as a privilege and an honor, if you will, as opposed to an entitlement. We talked about just briefly, or just recently, about training and how we can employ training as a strategy. And finally, I put, I'm sorry, two more. One is having a common goal. I heard that it was, important to have a common goal and to have agreement around that goal. And then finally, I heard celebration, that when we celebrate things and we have a positive interaction with people, we can take ourselves a long way. So you guys are really smart. You probably are much further along than you realize you are in getting those things done.
Diane, you had mentioned something about training, and I just wanted to offer this up. I work for Prison Fellowship, and we have a volunteer in-prison training.
Oh, we know you do.
Which is in the process of being canned, so it'll be on demand. We also, I'm on task force for mentor training, which is going to be completed within the next 30 days. No obligation, pfm.org, and get involved. You can get the training. You learn how to act in a prison setting. You learn how to treat people. You know what to do, do's and don'ts. And if you're a secular organization, what you do is just, take out what you need and use it. But it's we are noted for we're one of the best training outfits in the country.
We work with Rod Williams in our area all the time.
And so we offer that up, again, pfm.org. I'm not looking for anything, but
P like Paul, F like Frank, M like Mary.org.
.org. And there's a link there to where you can get involved. And again, there it is. And pfm.org. It's for prisonfellowshipministries.org. And the mentoring piece that's coming very soon is just absolutely has me really excited. So.
Not much to add to your list. Just maybe some final, just a few final thoughts. That the fact is that there is inevitably going to be some culture clash between the perspective that your mentors will bring and the perspective that our staff have. And recognizing that up front, knowing that it's going to happen and figuring out ways to mitigate it, that's important. Second, once you're able to get access, you really do want a champion inside. And you want to be strategic about who that is. You want somebody who's got clout and respect, primarily among the uniformed staff, because they are the ones that have the most, that carry the most weight. And if I were to suggest somebody, it would be the shift commander. Every prison has a commander of every shift. It's sometimes called the captain of the guard in some places. It's the top-ranking uniformed person. And in the eyes of the people who work on that shift, he or she is the Department of Corrections. It's not me, it's not the warden, it's the shift commander, and what that person says goes. You want to try to woo the shift commander so that he or she becomes your champion, your go-to person. Third, that staying power matters. We're conservative organizations. And ultimately, just showing up, as those of you who have done it for years know, carries its own weight. People and programs that were thought to be just shocking when they were first introduced, a few years later are absolutely incorporated into the rhythm of the institution. So just keep showing up. And the faith-based programs have a particularly good reputation that way because some of the not-for-profits are tagged with chasing the money. When the money goes, so does the program. The faith-based organizations have a different reputation in a lot of institutions because they're motivated not only by the money, they'll come no matter what. And finally, at the end of the day, it is in our interest for you to be there. And while that may not always be clear at the line level, it certainly is clear to people who think about it at the top. Let me give you the reasons why it's in our interest. A very important one is credibility with the community, especially communities that have traditionally had a tense relationship with corrections. Minority communities, for example. It is very much in our interest to have relationships there and some credibility there because it mitigates the kind of fallout that can occur if something goes wrong. We know that's in our interest. Second, the fact is that when it comes to operating in the world outside the walls, you have more contacts, you're more credible than we are. A legislator or a city council person is more likely to listen to you than they are to us. And so we need you to negotiate the world outside the walls with us. Third, you become advocates for us. And we don't have many out there. We're in competition with education, healthcare, transportation. When it comes to those hearings and the money is divided up, we need advocates too, and we recognize that you are our advocates. So we want that relationship to continue. And finally, sometimes things do go bad inside a correctional facility. It's inevitable that something will go wrong. And that's when we need friends, people who can provide some perspective, who can say, let me tell you that's not the only thing that goes on there. That's not the only thing that matters. There's a lot of conscientious people, good work being done. And we need, we feel very vulnerable when things go wrong, and you can be our friends. So thank you very much.
I have very little to add other than just a couple of items. One, champions come from all sorts of places. Look for champions. AT was talking about inside the wall. I'm talking about out in the community. There are champions out there. You just have to find them. For probation and parole officers, we can have each other's backs. things are going to go wrong. AT's right. I mean, someone's going to commit a crime. Somebody that you're mentoring, somebody that's in your program is going to screw up. Does that mean your program's bad? Does that mean the probation officer didn't do their job? Not necessarily, but we can support each other. The last thing I would tell you, and this has come out in many different ways, is that relationships, relationships, relationships. A good marriage does not occur in just a passing meeting. It takes time to build it. You have to show up. You have to be there during the good times and the bad times. And it's the same thing when you're trying to work with probation and parole officers. I mean, you go out on a date, what's their, what's this person's after when you go out on a date? Pretty soon you start having trust, you start building it, you start realizing that I don't like everything about that person, but there's a lot that I do like. You have to show up and you have to continue to work at it. It's not an easy process. Believe me, I've been married for 25 years. It's not an easy process, but I love my wife. So thank you.